Hey everybody, welcome to Safe Space Talk. So today's episode is going to be on PCOS, right?
Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome.
So of course you have me, Renee, the inclusive midwife on Instagram, and then you have Miss Lakeisha Murphy,
the Hood Midwife. What is it?
It's the Hood Midwife
Don't even know
underscore
my on
quiche,
Instagram,
honey, because life, as my sister cousin says, my life has been life.
Yes.
So that's all. We're going to do our ceremonial lighting of the candle. So we're going to basically do this, sending out all the good vibes to everybody that's just breathing, blinking, trying to make it through this human experience. Know that we are thinking about you. We are lifting you up in all of the good spirits, all the good energy that we have. We want you to do amazing things, little things, big things. Or, you know what, lay around and do nothing. Because that is restorative. Exactly. That is restorative care. So we'll sit this over here. And I would love to say that this is like my jam, but you'll find that with providers, every provider kind of has their jam, and sometimes our jam is what we just get served the most.
Yes.
But
exactly,
this is kind of more so your jam than it is mine.
And it is mine because I've been served up
it
a lot
so often.
This, yes.
So, but we're going to do an episode on my jam, which is going to be another episode that we have coming up soon because it's one of my passions and things like that, kind of because I see it so much that it's like, I'm determined we're going to learn. So Keisha's going to have us kind of leading off. I'm going to be the happy follower and kicking in just little, like the little background singer. So we can get this information to you guys.
So PCOS, Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, as the name implies, there's a characteristic hallmark. It's called the string of pearls. You'll see it on an ultrasound if you get an ultrasound.
And not pearls. Dang it.
And not every. Oh yeah, your little fake pearls on your glasses.
Oh yeah, look. See, look, there we go.
Your string of pearls.
My string of pearls. They have polycystic ovarian syndrome.
So fitting. So, the name would imply that would be the hallmark symptom, which is actually not always the hallmark symptom. Everyone with PCOS does not have polycystic ovaries.
Mm-hmm.
Only some people do, and it's actually only one of the 3 criteria that is needed. PCOS, there's always that question of what comes first and where in the cycle are we going wrong here? Because, as we know, it's the menstrual cycle. It cycles. One thing begets the next. The hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis is basically, that is a mouthful, and it does a lot of things. It drives your whole womanly cycle, and that's why they call it a cycle, because it is a cycle. So when you get to PCOS, there's a disruption in the cycle, and usually, I'm going to say, and for learning purposes today, we're going to say it starts with progesterone, the hormone progesterone. So towards the second half of your menstrual cycle, if you were to have a normal menses, you are very progesterone dominant. Mm-hmm. It's a heavy hormone at play during that time, and that rise normally begets the next part of the cycle, which is the stimulation of the new eggs that are going to become, or the new follicles that will become the egg. So try to stay with me here. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. In women with PCOS, they notoriously do not have that progesterone surge. And that's because a lot of times they're not ovulating. So yes, you'll have bleeds. You'll realize your bleeds are irregular. They're not on a cycle because they're not following this hormone cycle and this hormone pattern as we would like them to. So when you normally have an ovulation at day 14 of your cycle, your egg will ovulate. And when it ovulates and kind of bursts out of its little sac, it leaves a scar. And the scar is called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum puts out progesterone. This is what carries your pregnancy if you are to get pregnant. But if you're not getting pregnant, that progesterone still triggers. It still triggers the hypothalamus to not put out gonadotropin releasing hormone. So gonadotropin releasing hormone works on the gonads. The gonads of the female body are the ovaries. So the progesterone basically tells the gonadotropin releasing hormone to kind of slow down and pulse at a regular rate. I need just this much of you, just this much of you, just this much. So if PCOS happens and you don't have their progesterone, the gonadotropin releasing hormone kind of goes crazy, and it starts like, think of a rave. Exactly. It's pulsing away.
It's like do everything.
It's pinging off. So this then goes and makes the 2 hormones that are responsible for growing the eggs and releasing the eggs kind of go haywire as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the growing the eggs is the follicle stimulating hormone, as the name would imply. They stimulate the follicles to grow. Then the luteinizing hormone shoots up, and that's what makes that egg release finally. But because the gonadotropin releasing hormone is kind of pinging too much,
Mm-hmm.
the eggs are kind of growing, stopping, not really ever releasing,
Mm-hmm.
which then leads back to there's no hatching of the egg,
Mm-hmm.
there's no scar, and then there's no progesterone. So that's in a nutshell how that cycle starts a dysfunction.
Gotcha.
So hopefully I didn't lose you on that part. But because the eggs are the ovaries are not responding and not releasing that egg monthly, now the luteinizing hormone, which again releases the egg, and the follicle stimulating hormone, they get in an imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep on trying to tell that ovary, you got to release some eggs. Hey, we got to live. We got to,
Mm-hmm.
the next month is coming. We got to live. We got to make the next generation. So they keep telling it, and they tend to get higher and higher. They tend to get out of balance. With this excess of testosterone, you then have issues with insulin, which
Mm-hmm.
then later also will become some of the symptoms that we talk about with that. So a lot of times you'll have insulin resistance in PCOS, and that is the driving factor of some of the hallmark signs and symptoms we do see when women come into the
And a lot
office
of the
complaining.
pathological problems
Yes,
that it leads to.
right. Yes, and it's all, and that's why I say PCOS is such a difficult syndrome because it encompasses the whole body. It's
Even though
not
you
just
think it's just
right. Yeah, there
one
people always
thing.
think it's a woman issue, and it's not. It is a woman issue in that women have it, but
Yeah.
8% of women, the population, struggle with this, and
And I imagine probably 4% get diagnosed.
yes, yeah, well, and yeah, I like so many times people will come with hallmark things that are kind of just like boom, PCOS, boom, like in my eyes, bright flashing lights,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, have you ever seen anybody ever talk to you about this? No.
No.
Okay.
Well, we have failed you.
Yeah, great. If that explanation was a little bit difficult, which it can be, and it can be kind of confusing even for providers to learn this, because this is not something that you learn in school and just are proficient at. This is years of learning and seeing how people respond and seeing what practices are best. So let's also take this and kind of explain it in a little bit more simplistic of a way. So if you think about like again what I was saying, the HPO axis, the hypothalamus, the pituitary or the anterior pituitary, and then the ovaries. Those are the three main players of that. So if you think of the hypothalamus up in your brain, the top part of your well, not the top part of your brain, but is
But it's
in
the
your brain.
highest,
It's
yeah.
one of the basic forms of functioning in your brain. It is basically the CEO of a company. Think about it, the CEO of your menstrual cycle. And he gives out the instructions and the timelines and the dates of when the newest ovulation or the newest egg is going to be put out.
Yeah.
This will then go down to your anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary is also
like
is kind of the manager. So the CEO talks to the manager then disseminates out to the ovaries, the workers, the factory workers, the line workers, when these eggs are to be produced, how fast they are to be produced, and when they are to be released, and when they are to not be released, and when they're not supposed to be growing, and when they are supposed to be growing.
Exactly. So they're managing the production time frame and the excretion of the eggs, the worker bees.
So in PCOS, the very, very top doesn't get the data, the feedback from the eggs that it needs to now put out the new timelines, the new dates, and the new release dates of these eggs. So it's basically like having a factory that has all the supplies, it has all the workers, it has everything that it needs.
But it has Michael Scott as its manager.
Yes. So so you may get the pamphlet of how to put the egg together, or you might not even get the pamphlet of how to put the egg together totally. Or you might get the pamphlet that is missing the dates, so everybody's putting out their eggs at different times, and this is not working because we're all supposed to be only working on one egg, and they didn't know that. So and there's little pieces of information not being cycled all the way down to the ovaries. So that leaves you with eggs in all states of production. Some are released or ready to be released. Some cannot be released. Some are in halfway through the phases. Some are the very beginning phases. Some are just been stunted in growth for months, and
they just hang out.
They just kind of hang out, which gives us then one of the criteria for the Rotterdam criteria, which you need 2 out of the 3 of. which is cyst-filled ovaries, or that string of pearl-like appearance on the ultrasound. Some people can feel their ovaries because that's how big and lumpy they've become and painful and tender.
Yeah.
So they can actually feel that pain on that side, and others don't feel anything at all, and you just notice it happened or happen to notice it on the ultrasound.
Yeah.
So some of the other criteria that we will base your diagnosis of PCOS off of is facial hair growth or hair growth on your chest. That is more uncharacteristic for women, more characteristic for men. The thicker hair, a lot of women will be like, I have to shave, I get a 5 o'clock shadow. So excess testosterone signs, because like I said, there's that excess testosterone because your ovaries aren't listening to what your brain is trying to say.
And you also have the excess testosterone because remember, you have all the estrogen is there, and there's no deficit of it, and you gain more and more estrogen and more because we're trying to build those follicles, and it sits in fat cells. So they'll usually have a broader midsection, and where there is broader like fat cells,
there's more estrogen.
And then there's more testosterone.
And then also you will have irregular cycles. This is the biggest one that people come to me with. I've never had regular cycles. I've always had irregular cycles. I'll miss 2 or 3, and then I'll have super heavy ones, or I'll have spotting randomly all through the month, or I'll have 2 in 1 month. Never had, and that's usually that's the catalyst that'll bring a lot of people in. Yep. They will have no periods for months at a time, then have one really bad one because you've had all that lining build up. So now you're working double time. Factory's working double time trying to get that lining out, and it hurts really bad, it cramps really bad, you're having so much heavy bleeding, you're clotting.
And they think they're miscarrying a lot of times.
And they're thinking something's wrong, so they come for that, or then they'll have that and then turn around 2 weeks later and then have another bleed, and then they're like, this is the last straw. So that's what brings people in a lot for evaluation for that. And so if you have 2 out of the 3 criteria, you've already met the criteria to be diagnosed with PCOS. And this is why I feel like it's been underdiagnosed a lot, because so many people easily, I have facial hair. Yes, I have irregular periods. Boom.
You're
got
done.
it. You don't need any imaging. You don't
have to do anything else.
Right. So, sadly, I feel like underdiagnosed.
So one of the things that we do to actually tell you, or the gold standard is, we use the Rotterdam PCOS criteria. So you have to have 2 out of 3 of these items in order to actually qualify and say, okay, you roll in as a diagnostic as a diagnosis for PCOS. It is oligo or amenorrhea, which basically means really, really slow periods or absent of periods. You don't even have them anymore. Chemical and or biochemical signs of hyperandrogenism. So that would be things like excruciatingly poignant acne. Like it's very noticeable on their face.
Yeah, that deep.
And it's deep and it comes under, and it's like you can't always pop it. They're not always whiteheads. They're not always blackheads, but they are prevalent. Unwanted hair. So for biological females, we don't necessarily desire to have a mustache. We don't desire to have thick unibrow. We don't desire to have hair on our chin. A lot of them will have hair right here on their underside of their neck. And so that's another sign. And then the last one is the polycystic ovaries, and the exclusion of anything else that could lead to those other things. So there are actually, believe it or not, there are other things that can lead to those first 2. But if they are still trying to rule it out, they can look on the ultrasound to see if you also have that. But you don't have to have the imaging if you have those first 2, and they can easily rule out and say, well, it's not this or it's not something different. Now, first thing that I think most people would do whenever you have someone coming in with the amenorrhea, like they're missing their periods, is the progesterone challenge test. And that's one of the ways you can kind of tell.
I do that only if they've said, I've not had a period in several months. Like if they've had a recent bleed, I don't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
I will check their follicle stimulating hormone, because that's the one that talks to the eggs to tell them to grow. I will check their luteinizing hormone, because that's the one that tells your eggs to quote unquote hatch.
Yeah.
I would check your estrogen. I would check your testosterone. I would check your long-term sugar control, which is an A1C. I would check your insulin to glucose ratio. I would check your thyroid just to make sure that your thyroid is not what's causing you to have irregular. I would check your vitamin D, because a lot of times that also can mess and play with your cycles. So and your glucose control, as far as how well you're metabolizing, or how well the insulin is actually doing its job. So I do a lot of blood work first, because I feel like that can easily, and not with a lot of invasiveness, tell me. And then usually I'm already telling them, let's go ahead and get you scheduled for your transvaginal. We're just going to get it all done at once, so I can give Eric all the information
at one time.
Gotcha. And then I'll have you follow up and say, hey, make an appointment, but a couple days after your ultrasound. By then I'll have your labs back, and we can look at everything together and kind of see.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times you're going to see elevated A1C. That means high levels of glucose in the blood at all times. You're going to see elevated insulin to glucose ratios, because your insulin is trying very hard to bring it down, and it's not working.
It's not working.
You're going to see high levels of LH and FSH, and you're going to see, even with them, they should be kind of equal or on par to each other. And a lot of times they're not. You will see that the hormone that's telling the egg to hatch is doubled, and sometimes even tripled the one that's just stimulating and telling it to grow. So they're not on par, and they're not talking to each other. They should be kind of besties, and maybe one knows double of the other, but that's about the limit it should be. It shouldn't be that
3 times, like 3-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So, but they could still be all in normal range. And that's where a lot of people get overlooked and misdiagnosed, because you're not looking at, you're like, oh, these look fine. They look in the range that they should be. But even within the cycle, they should be at different ranges. So where are we? And is the estrogen line up with that? Does the progesterone line up with that? So depending on where you are in your cycle,
or how long it's been since you last had one.
Yes. So if you're desiring pregnancy, these can be sometimes multiple lab draws over the course of time, as we try to figure out where we are, what stage you're being stuck in. Because usually you're going to be stuck in the pre-ovulation phase, which is where the eggs are growing at the rate that they should be. And then like we said earlier, with the progesterone, the lack thereof, it doesn't cycle back over.
Well, I think, and a lot of times that's when the PCT, the progesterone challenge test, comes into play, because you actually take that and you manufacture a blood cycle.
Yeah.
And then they more than likely get pregnant. Not more than likely, but that assists
them. It'll help them bleed, and hopefully that progesterone will tell the LH and the FSH to
show them
to make some eggs or something. Go do your job. Go make some eggs or something.
And do something. Be productive. So those are the criteria. So believe it or not, honestly, I mean, if you have some of the symptoms that we're talking about, this is worth going to your doctor. The labs that we talked about, these are worth asking, because some of the doctors are going to say, okay, well, I'll check your testosterone and I'll check your FSH and LH, and then you're out of here.
And then they're normal range, and they tell you you're fine, and that's not...
Carry along, little ones.
So, yeah, so definitely...
list these labs down and say, these are the labs that I would like to have, and I want every single last one of them drawn.
Yeah.
Like, advocate for it.
You want someone that's knowledgeable on how to read the labs, because like I said, they could come back in normal range and still be totally indicative of PCOS.
And then let's see, and I think that's, what else can you think
of?
So
treatments for this, obviously when people come in, they're gonna want to know, what can I do about it, and this is the suckiest thing to say, but losing weight, losing 5 to 7% of your body weight is usually pretty helpful, in addition to taking a glucose lowering agent. So usually like metformin, something like that. And that's going to bring some of that insulin resistance down. Sometimes if you're not planning on having a baby at any point in time, you can do something like spironolactone. I can't say that word.
Yes, you can. You did very well.
That can help with the hair growth that's unwanted. That can help with the cystic acne. So these are all treatment things that treat the symptoms, but they don't really prevent
correct anything
or correct what's going on. Birth control containing estrogen, and drospiridone, those are kind of one of the better ones. So Yasmin, those are like your top ones that you're going to use. Those kind of can help with the cystic ovaries, because it's kind of like telling your body to be quiet, and we're doing this for you. So it's not creating a whole bunch of eggs. You're not ovulating at all, because you're taking the birth control. So don't get those cysts. If you're wanting to become pregnant, then you got to work on your A1C if it's high, work on losing weight if that's the issue.
A1C, weight, metformin.
Get your insulin kind of to glucose ratio under control, and then it's probably gonna be some If your cycle doesn't regulate from that in itself, you may have to do Clomid or some kind of fertility drugs in general to kind of get to stimulate those ovaries from to not ovulating first, because you want them to ovulate. So do you want to do some fertility drugs to help yourself ovulate and stimulate some of
And
that
get it going.
egg factory making? So yeah, those are some of the treatments that you would normally come across. And like I said, unfortunately, I always hate telling people like you have to lose weight, but a great deal of the women I see with PCOS do have weight issues, are in the obesity BMI range.
And it's very hard for them to lose weight, which makes it even worse. It's not easy.
Yes,
like,
it makes
you think, oh, I'll eat vegetables for a week and drink water and drop soda, and it's
how
like
everybody else's would normally. You could be doing all the right things and still
it'd be hard to lose the weight.
Yeah, not be having any success on the scale.
Yeah. So that's the hardest part of it.
But this is, like I said, this is kind of a lifelong thing. So don't give up. Don't feel like you're going to get a quick fix. Don't think that one individual pill is going to save your life. It's a whole host of things that you do together. Lifestyle management, eating correctly. There's a ton of pages on Instagram. The PCOS nutritionist is on there. There's a lot of dietitians. I like to send my ladies that are diagnosed with PCOS to dietitians so they can start learning how to eat what's productive for their body. They're a lot of times deficient in different vitamins and minerals. So zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, all things that people are probably not getting enough of
in general.
And yeah, so easily just kind of help having their body work with them to get the results they want, and not just adding more pills onto it, because this is lifestyle changing that you have to do. So
in order to manage it, because it's not something that you just popped up with, and it's not something you just get rid of.
Yeah. So for all they call themselves the sisters, CYSTER, the sisters. I think that's so cute.
That is so cute. Yeah, I like that.
So for all my sisters out there, we see you, we support you.
Yes.
Get yourself a provider that's willing to work with you on the things that you may find petty even to bring up, but these are still real lifestyle things. Like having a cycle when you never know when you're going to have a cycle, to me is like, some people might be like, oh yeah, that's an annoyance at best. To me, that's horrible, because I want to know, when can I sit on my boyfriend's face?
Safely.
When can I do this?
Exactly. Or you just, how about this? I would like to go to work and not have to make a run for it.
Yes, I would like to wear a white dress on so things that might be considered an annoyance, or like, hey, I'm starving myself and running 5Ks and I'm like still like morbidly obese. Yeah.
Nothing has changed.
So these things might be considered an annoyance at best to some people, but find yourself a provider that's willing to listen and delve deep into these issues with you.
One of the ways that I spoke to a physician was because I didn't feel like they were listening to me, and to them it was, oh, here's a lady coming in with a little complaint, and essentially my complaint at the time, ironically, was acne, but it was acne that was new. I'd never had it, and it stayed forever, and I could not get rid of it. I tried everything with my primary provider and all that. So we went to a dermatologist. I went in with this big old purse, honey, of all the cleansers and the creams and the everything. And he was like, your skin looks good. And I was like, thank you for the compliment. To you, this is not a big deal. But for me, this has changed my perception of how my life is going. And it's altering my daily feelings on my own self.
Yeah.
So for you, I understand that you're looking at my face and you're like, you look fine. I've never had to put makeup on every single day to make my face not look the way that it is.
Right.
This, to me, I'm not saying it's life altering like a cancer diagnosis, but this alters how I function in my life every day without fail. And he kind of just looked at me. He was like, you know what? But then I'm sorry. Let's see what we can do together. And sometimes you just have to word it like that. You have to advocate for yourself, and you just have to, you have to Claire Huxtable it. You're like, look, this is changing how I get dressed every day. This is changing my morning routine. I have to add another 10 minutes for makeup. I have to add another this just to feel like I'm going out there looking like my typical self. So if this is what you're dealing with, if these are some of those things, I have to shave. I have to take an extra 10 minutes to shave. I have to do this before I go to work. If I get up and I'm late and I don't have time to shave, people are looking at me funny. Like, this changes the perception that I get from other people and the perception that I have towards myself on a daily basis, and I need you to take this as seriously as it's affecting me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's some of the ways that's just because some people wonder, how do you
but
word
then also
things?
be honest with what you are doing and what you're adhering to as far as treatment at home. Because I feel like a lot of people just want to say like, yeah, I did it, because they want to be the good patient, but knowing they didn't
really
adhere
do
to it. Yeah, so we don't know if it failed or not because
because you barely tried it. Yeah. Whenever I went in there, I brought all of my stuff, all of my little used up stuff. I was like, I had, and I mean, stuck to this right as rain. So I can't say that I did that with a clean conscience. So don't take, one pill and then go up there and make that speech and think it's supposed to work. Like, you have to truly authentically try, but to be heard, sometimes you just want to know, how do I even word it so I don't sound like I'm whiny, or how do I word it so I'm not, bitchy or whatever, because you have to be nice if you're a female. That's the first rule. We have to be nice. We can't be forward because then we're aggressive.
Yes.
We can't be to the point because then we have no tact.
So recap the ones that the labs you would like to ask for: FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, vitamin D, insulin glucose ratio is always good to throw on there, and your A1C. So that's about 9 labs. That's a good amount of blood work to kind of get you started.
Yep. And I would say that, and get yourself treated. And we want to hear your success stories. We want to hear your stories, period.
Let me know down below.
Let us know, exactly. And I'll just have to watch from afar. I love it because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm a follower. Because Keisha runs the page, and I'm just sitting here like, reading the stories, just here for the tea. But we'll blow out this candle, and that is our episode on PCOS, which affects so very many of us. Thank you, Keisha, our residential expert, for getting us through this today. That is for everybody going through a little bit of something. So we are thinking about you. Don't forget that. And reach out to us anytime. We are so happy to have you guys. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.